Okay, remember the first thing that you always need to do is put your name on your assignment. And remember, for this assignment, you are able to edit in Google Slides. So you just type on the text box and enter your information. Just like with the previous page, some of these template boxes have more information in them than what you will need. You will have to delete some of the information for it to be correct, but it's there to help you get started. Okay, so we're continuing on with X-linked inheritance, also known as sex-linked inheritance, because the X chromosome is one of the two sex chromosomes, the Y chromosome being the other. So when you complete a genetic problem with an X-linked gene, you need to specify which progeny, remember, progeny is the offspring, the children, you need to specify which ones are female and which ones are male. So in this example, we are going to look at mice. So we have these two little mice over here off to the side. Mice with the recessive greasy allele, so little n, have shiny fur. It's oily. You can see the little greasy mouse over to the side. It looks like its hair styled a little bit, almost like there was hair gel there. That's depicting the grease that's present in the hair. Normal fur is not greasy looking and is caused by a dominant allele. Big N. So we're using big N for normal, little n for the recessive greasy allele. The coat shininess gene is on the X chromosome. So it is an X-linked trait. If a normal male is crossed to a carrier female, what percentage of their male progeny will have greasy fur? Well, in order to answer this question, let's do one step at a time. So which trait, which allele is dominant? The normal fur. Which is represented with an X and then an exponent of a capital N. Because remember, this is located on the X chromosome only. So which trait is recessive? That's the greasy fur. Still has to be on the X chromosome. There is no allele for this gene on the Y chromosome at all. Now, it's the recessive allele, so it's the lowercase. Okay, step 2. Let's identify the parents involved here. So we have a normal male. Normal fur, male. We're going to put our symbol for male. That is the biological father. Now you have enough room to put this on one line when you type. The biological mother is obviously a female. And she is a normal haired individual, but she is in fact a carrier. We specifically said a carrier female. So what does that look like in regards to the genotype? Well, let's think back. Okay, a male has an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. There's no allele for this trait at all on the Y chromosome. He is normal, which means he has to have a big N on his only X chromosome. The female is a carrier. That means she has to have one of the recessive alleles. We know that as a biological female, she has two X chromosomes. She has normal fur, which means she has to have one big N. Since she's a carrier, she also has one little n. Okay, let's identify the alleles present. So the biological father has one big N, and again, you can use a comma or an and here. And he has a Y chromosome that does not have an allele present on it. That's why there's no exponent on that Y. The biological mother has one big N and one little n. Okay, so now let's do our Punnett square. So we have our carrier female mother, which means she is big N, little n. We have our normal haired father, which means he is big N, Y. Okay, so now fill these out. I'm just going to highlight the title on the sides so that you don't get confused about what's in the actual Punnett square. Okay, remember we go in alphabetical order and we put capital letters first. So this top left-hand box, it would have two X's with a big N on each of them. So it doesn't matter which one we put first here because they are, in fact, the same. Okay, back to where we were. Okay, I'm going to make that a little bit smaller just because we're going to do our sex determination in a minute. So we want to have room there. Okay, now let's go through and determine the sex of the offspring. So the top row, each of these has two X chromosomes, which means we're dealing with females. And the bottom row each has one X chromosome and one Y chromosome. So we're dealing with males. Okay, now let's figure out what trait they have. So this top left-hand corner has two big N's. So they're going to have normal fur. All right, the top right-hand corner is a female. So she has two copies of the X chromosome. She has one big N, which means she's going to have normal fur because she has a copy of the dominant allele. In the bottom left-hand corner, this male has one X chromosome, and on that X chromosome, he has the dominant allele. So he's going to have normal fur as well. And then the bottom right-hand corner, you have a male that only has one X chromosome, by definition of being male. And on that X chromosome, he has the recessive allele, a little n, which means he is going to have greasy fur. So one of the four boxes represents greasy furred offspring. So let's write down our ratios. So for the genotypic ratios, these are all four different. So we're going to have one of each of these. So you have one outcome with big N, big N. You have one of the 4 outcomes with big N, little n. You have one of the 4 outcomes with a big N and then a Y chromosome that doesn't have an allele for this trait. And then you have one of the outcomes with a little n and a Y chromosome that doesn't include an allele for this trait. Now remember, that doesn't mean that the box represents one offspring. It's that the whole box, all 4 squares together, represent 100% of the offspring. So each box would represent 25% of the offspring. So 25% would be expected to be homozygous dominant females. 25% would be expected to be heterozygous females. 25% would expected to be normal furred males, and 25% would be expected to be greasy males. Okay, so our phenotype. What do we see? So just like we pointed out above, this first genotype represents normal fur. Normal furred female specifically, because we have 2 X chromosomes. The second genotype represents a carrier female. So notice this person is, well, this mouse is going to have normal fur. That's what you're going to see. But she is going to be able to carry on that recessive allele to the next generation. Male only has 1 copy of the allele for normal versus greasy fur. So this third genotype represents a male offspring with normal fur, because the allele on the 1X chromosome is the dominant normal allele. And then lastly, we have a genotype that codes for a male with greasy fur, because he only has 1 X chromosome, and on that X chromosome he has the greasy allele. So let's write everything out specifically. And actually, I want to add in a specific word here. So 25% of all offspring would be considered greasy. Now I added all because we're also going to make a note that 50% of male would be greasy. None of the females will be greasy, okay? Notice that explanation does not account for all of the boxes, okay? 75% of all of the offspring would be normal furred. I didn't write that on the explanation here. I want you to be clear that that's what we're talking about. 50% of male offspring, okay, would be greasy. That only represents 25% of all of the offspring. Okay, wrapping this up a little bit, why are there very few genetic problems with Y chromosome alleles? Well, it's because the Y chromosome is so small that it actually has very few genes on it. So there just aren't a lot of places for issues to arise. The human Y chromosome has many repeated junk sections, in fact. As small as it is, it still has junk sections. And it only has a few genes. One of the genes is the SRY gene. And that's the most important gene in testes development. So it makes sense that that gene would be located on the Y chromosome because it would only be necessary for biological males to have that gene.